So we talked about answering the call, and this week we're going to talk just a bit about a way in the wilderness. Have you ever gone through a wilderness in your life before? Put them out. Let me see. Some of y'all so deep you don't even know you're in the wilderness. That's what this is. Well, I want to tell you about our beginning years, kind of from 94 to around 2000, mostly the second half of that period. When we got the call, I told you last week, when we were in Ocala, Florida, we were preaching, doing a really 3-week revival, and we were staying at the pastor's house, and we had stayed up late one night, and it was about 3:30 or so in the morning, and we went to bed, and at that point, we had been already working in Brooklyn and all that stuff, and we were like, we were thinking that if we planted a church, or whenever we would plant a church, it would be in Brooklyn. And just laying there right in the bed, I began to wrestle with it. It was like, no. And I looked at Pastor Moore and I said, it's not Brooklyn. I just knew it in that moment. And just standing there, I said, it's a city, and it's a city like Atlanta. And when Atlanta came out of my mouth, something exploded on the inside of me, literally. And I could hardly sleep after that. It looked like everything that we ran into in Central Florida was Atlanta. The next day, a woman was standing right in the middle of a congregation, and I called her out to pray for her. And I don't even know why I asked her where she's from, because I didn't know she wasn't from Ocala. And she said, I'm from Atlanta. What you doing here? When I tell you everything that could say Atlanta before we got back to New York said Atlanta. There was many more things like that. And so when we got to Atlanta in July of 1994, we moved to Lithonia. And we got into our home. It was delayed because our loan fell out, and we got another loan, and we moved in on a Friday. And when I tell you that the closing ended up being a year to the date that the Lord gave the word to us, that we moved into our home, and the following Sunday, a week after, we started in our den. We got 8 chairs from Office Depot and put them up with a music stand in our den, and we started inviting people. We had no friends here. We had no family here. We just started inviting people. And people began to come, and others began to move down, and as time went, we were in our den, and then from the den, we outgrew the den, and then we had a living room, dining room area that was kind of like one larger room, so we all shifted over to that room. We began to outgrow that. And one of our earliest members, Elder Darrell Finley and his wife, Lisa Finley, he said to me, we got to get out of here. We need to get another place. I said, all right, well, go start looking. And so he started looking, and he found a spot off of I-20. You could pass it on the highway, and you could see it. It's an office place right there. And right next to that, there's the hotel that, well, the robbers came from there and robbed us, but that's a different story. And so we went to Decatur, and before you knew it, eventually we were in Atlanta. And the reason why we were in Atlanta is because when God called me, where did he call me to go? See, y'all better than the first service. They was like, I don't know. Like, I just gave it an answer. But anyway, so yeah, Atlanta. So we're in Atlanta. We did a lot of ministry. We did a lot of street ministry. We were with Hosea Feed the Hungry. Our first Thanksgiving, we sat and we were on lines, all of us serving food out there with his people. When I tell you we did outdoor crusades. We did theatrical presentations outdoor. We gave the choice for tots. We gave away food. We gave away clothing. And then I knew something was wrong one day when we had given away all this stuff. We walked right out of the center we were worshiping at. They was on the side of the center selling the stuff we gave them. I'm like, we just gave it to you for free. How you going to be out there selling it? It's like, it's not supposed to quite go like this. I know something ain't right. That ain't how it's supposed to go. And then as time went on, a few years later, we began to make our way back towards the suburbs. I'll explain that in a minute. Began to make our way back towards the suburbs. And by the 3rd year, now we started in July. You notice we celebrate in October. We started Sunday mornings in October. We started Sunday nights in July. On the first Sunday in October of 1994, we started. On the first Sunday of October 1997, I resigned. And I don't quit. I'm not a quitter. I mean, you name it, I've done a lot of different things, and I have decent stamina. I commit to something, and I do it. But at this point, we were exhausted. We had already been traveling back and forth to serve in Atlanta. First of all, we were working in Mableton. So we would go out to the exit where Six Flags is every day from Lithonia, come back to Lithonia with 2 kids and go back to Atlanta on Wednesday nights, go back to Lithonia to get able to go back to Cobb County the next morning, and then to do it again on Sunday. And so we were exhausted from all the traveling, commuting. And then it was a lot of demands. Ministry became very demanding. Everybody had a vision for what they wanted the church to be at that time. And I was trying to please everybody, but if I pleased you, I was displeasing you. And I tried to please you, then I displeased him. Then I pleased him, displeased her. And by the time it was over, I found myself people-pleasing. Anybody ever been there before? And it was killing me. It was killing me. And so it was trying times financially because I had just transitioned out of teaching by that point. And I was burned out and I was exhausted. And one Saturday night, just cleaning up the sanctuary in the storefront, we were there, Pastor Mona and our two kids. I think Brandon was 4 maybe, and Chantel was, 2 or something like that, or 3, 5, and 2. And we sitting there and we're like, I'm exhausted. I could just give up. But if you talk yourself long enough, what are you going to do? I did it, right? So I was like, all right. I was expecting Pastor Mona to talk me out of it. I said, I think we should just end it out. She's like, I think so too. Normally, that would not have happened. So we were both in a bad spot. So we had a whole plan devised. We said, well, we're just going to let them know tomorrow morning, the first Sunday in October. We said, we're going to let all the people know, but we want to help them, and we'll continue to the end of October, and we'll help them all find another church that they can get plugged in at. So I get up on that Sunday, and I quit. And like I said, I don't quit much. I really remember quitting one other thing. That was football at 8 years old, and it was better for the team that way. And so I quit, and then some folks prayed me through and sort of held up my arms. And in that season, God showed me something. He said, you could go on, and you can do what I called you to do, and you could go all the way with it. You could be faithful, and you could be fruitful, and you can make it. He said, but you can't do it the way you're doing it. And he began to open my eyes of where change needed to be. The first thing that he opened my eyes to is that we didn't have to be in a metropolitan, in the city of Atlanta. We could be in the metropolitan, we could be in the suburbs. So there was a shift there. So we were making our way. The second thing was I had to shift from doing because we had done everything. When I say we did everything, we did everything. We put the chairs out. I played the keyboard. Pastor Mona led praise and worship. When I say we did everything, we cleaned up. We did it. When I say everything, everything. And he said, you got to stop doing and stop delegating and start leading and start developing. So when you have active core training session, understand it came out of a painful time and a place where passion was burned. When you burning on the inside of me. When you hear me talk about leadership, it came out of that season. And so I had to shift with that. And so we started developing leaders in the church and really pouring into the people that were walking with us. And the final thing was I had to stop trying to change everybody else because you can't change nobody. And God showed me all you got to do is change you. And when you change you, it changes everybody else around you. And so when I began to make the changes in me and let God unfold what he wanted to do in me, everything else and everybody else around me began to change. And I'm going to tell you, there's some things that you absolutely just don't see until you go through a wilderness. And that's exactly what happened for us. And I want to encourage you this morning. You might be in a wilderness in your life right now. And see, what a wilderness is, to put definition to it, it's a transformative period if you use it right. It's a transformative period. But during that transformative period, your faith is tested. Your identity is tested. Your future and where you're going to go is tested. And what you find out is that when your faith is tested, the question is, what am I going to believe coming out of this wilderness? Am I going to believe that I can make it or I'm not going to make it? Am I going to believe that God has called me, that he has a plan for me? Am I going to let go of what God has given me? Your identity is tested. That means, who am I going to become when I come out of it? Am I going to come out of this wilderness hardened? Am I going to come out of this wilderness bitter? Am I going to come out of this wilderness living alone and isolated? How will you come out of the wilderness that you've gone into? It's part of your transformative period. And pretty much everybody in the Bible has gone through a wilderness period. And I imagine everybody in the room has gone through a wilderness period. And the final thing that's in question is, what is my future going to look like? When this is all over, which way am I headed and where am I going to go? I want to encourage you this morning about how God can make a way in the wilderness. Y'all ready? Here we go. Genesis chapter 21, verse 14 through 21. Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He set them on her shoulders and then sent her off with the boy. The boy is Ishmael, her son. She went on her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, I cannot watch the boy die. And as she sat there, she began to sob. This is a mother contemplating the idea of losing herself and her son. God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What is the matter, Hagar?" Now, y'all know whenever God asks a question or sends an angel ask one, it's never because he don't know the answer. "Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." And you should know this. Let me just throw this out there ahead of time, that great nation is the Arab people today. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God stayed with the boy as he grew up. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer. While he was living in the desert of Haran, his mother got a wife for him from Egypt. Okay, let me just lay a few things around what's happening so you can really appreciate what they're trying to tell us in this particular text. The first thing I need you to understand is when we think about a wilderness, because we're American, we think about the wilderness being the woods. You know, this kind of treed, forest kind of thing. That's not the biblical wilderness. The biblical wilderness is a desert, right, to be real clear. And to have also experienced it, not only read about it, but to have gone to the land and to see how a desert, when I tell you that when Jesus went into the wilderness or into the desert, it wasn't a long way from where he was. You could sit on the temple in Jerusalem and see the desert. It's not quite across the street, but it's right there. So this was a wilderness that was a desert. That's the first thing. Now, Hagar is a unique character because Hagar she's not an Israelite. She's not one of God's chosen. She was not going to be one of God's chosen because God chose Israel to be a light to the others to bring them in, but she was not part of that chosen group that God was forming through Abraham. So God uses this Egyptian woman because what happens is she becomes a bond servant, a maid servant to Sarah. Now, Sarah having a maid servant, and I want to be clear here, a couple of things. It's not slavery. It looks more like an indentured servant. Does that make sense? Okay, so sometimes we read the Bible and we look from where we are versus to what it looked like in their time. And what happens is God makes Abraham and Sarah a promise. Because remember, Abraham wanted a son, and I told you last week, God said, you could have a son, but I want to make you a father of many nations. Ain't that something how we aim low and God? No, that's a different message. So God says, you're going to be a father of many nations. Well, you know how it goes. Time went on, and nothing happened. Nothing in their situation changed. Sarah is still barren. She's still past the age of having children. They got a promise, but nothing changed. And you know how we get when we get a little impatient, when we're like, God, you really could have moved by now, but maybe I need to kind of take matters into my own hands. So you know how we take matters into our own hands, and we try to help God. Now, I know y'all have never tried to help God on this side of the room. There's them over there. Yeah, all right. So there's that. Sarah said, all right. My reading of it. Sarah said to Abraham, I got an idea. Why don't you go into my maidservant, Hagar, and through her, I will have a child. Yeah, that's the plan. And Abraham said, okay, sounds good to me. So in that process, Hagar becomes Abraham's second wife. So she gets pregnant, and it's one thing, status is interesting then and still to today. So here's Hagar, a young girl with no status in a foreign land that's working as a maidservant for a really, Abraham and Sarah, side note, they're very wealthy. I don't know if y'all know that. Very wealthy people and high. And so she's working for them, and she's pregnant. And the Bible says that Hagar despised. Sarah was despised in Hagar's eyes. It's as if to say, oh, y'all think you got it going on. I got what you really want. I got what you can't even have. I got what you can't produce. And the Bible says that when Sarah saw that, she dealt harshly with her. In my mind, she was cursing her out. You blankety blank, 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 blank. So she ran out, and she ran into the wilderness. And in the wilderness, She met by the one she says that saw her. She saw the God that saw her. And in that, when she meets God, when she's pregnant, the Lord says, listen, Hagar, don't be afraid. I got you. She says, you're going to have a son. He says, you're going to have a son, and that son is going to become a great nation. Go back now and submit to Sarah. Now, you know that had to be God, because y'all know after all that, somebody done told you off, offended you, hurt your feelings, and you got to go back and submit to her. So she goes back and submits to her. Fast forward, more time goes by. God tells them, that was cute, but that's not my plan. Ishmael is not it. So about 15 to 16 years goes by. Sarah has Isaac. Isaac is being weaned. It's a big party to celebrate Isaac is being weaned. And at the party, Ishmael's like, nah, boo, yay, I'm older than you. I'm, kind of paraphrasing here. I'm older than you. I got you. And Sarah saw that. She said, this woman over here. She tells her husband, she says, get rid of her and her son. I don't want her or her son sharing in Isaac's inheritance. Now, you need to understand that inheritance is real important, because when the man passes away in a patriarchal society, in that culture, it meant that the son would then take care of the mother. But the son needs to have something to take care of the mother with. And because Ishmael was still Abraham's son, and technically his firstborn, Ishmael should have been entitled to a double portion. Are you with me? Y'all falling asleep on me? Because y'all almost put me to sleep last week. I just need to let y'all know that. So y'all awake? Okay. So Sarah said, oh no, he ain't going to get a double portion. Get her and him out of here. Abraham is distraught. He loves his son. He wouldn't want to put him out, wouldn't want to put Hagar out. And the Lord ministers to Abraham and says, that's all right. Do what Hagar says. He said, but I want you to be comforted. I'm still going to make Ishmael into a great nation. So he gets up early. This is where we get to our text this morning. He gets up early in the morning, and notice it didn't say Sarah got up. She didn't even want to come out and see the lady goodbye. Let me just be real clear about Bible characters. The Bible never tries to paint anybody as perfect in the Bible. The only one that's perfect is Jesus. Everybody God used had flaws. So touch yourself and say, God can use me too. All right. So Hagar goes out in the wilderness. She got about roughly 3 gallons of water in that little water sack. She's got some food, and she's got her son who's a teenager at this point. And then all of a sudden the Bible says that the water ran out. Have you ever been in a desert where the water runs out? Where what was sustaining you has been exhausted. Where the strength you thought you could lean on to carry you forward, you don't have that strength. It was gone by that point. The joy that you once had that would be strength for you was eradicated. It was gone. You'd exhausted everything on the inside of you. All your resources are exhausted, not just your internal, but your external resources. Anybody ever looked at your bank account and it was negative? Oh, y'all felt that one. And in her despair, she knows that time is short. You could go 40 days without food and still live. But you can only go 3 days without water and live. She knows that the time is short and her son is going to pass. She puts him under a bush, and she goes an arrow's distance away. And she's sobbing and crying. And the angel says that he heard Ishmael's cry, not even the mother's cry. He said, it says God has heard Ishmael's cry, letting you know that God is concerned about the thing you're concerned about. And he knows and he sees what's happening to that thing, to that person, to that family member, whatever it is that's burdening you. He wanted you to understand that he sees that too. And then the angel goes over the promise again that Ishmael will become a great nation. And then the Bible says something real curious here. It says that God opened up her eyes and she saw a well of water. And I need you to understand something. This was no miracle that all of a sudden while she's standing there that God did a Shazam and boom, a well of water appeared. The Bible didn't say he put the well of water there in that moment. The Bible said he opened up her eyes that she could see the well of water. The question I have for you is, why didn't she see it before that moment? I'm going to argue this morning, the reason she couldn't see it is the same reason why we often can't see the thing that God has for us. We're so busy being distracted by our despair and our despondency and our doubts and our fears that we cannot see the thing that God has already provided. I don't know how long that well was there. It could have been there for hundreds of years. It could have been there for 10 years. Regardless, the well was there, and she couldn't see it because she was blinded by despair. She was blinded by all the stuff that was happening on the inside of her. And oftentimes we cannot see the thing that God has already done. Can I tell you that the miracle was not making and putting the water there? The miracle is that she's inside of a large wilderness desert, and that in her despair and in her lack of water and in her limitation, that God sovereignly leads her right to the place that where the water was. That's the miracle. Is that Siri again? Somebody? And I need you to understand something. When we talk about God making a way in the wilderness, can I tell you that he's already made the way? It's already been made. It's not that God hasn't made a way, it's that I haven't seen it yet. It's not that God is not making the way. He's already made the way, but I need to be praying, God, open my eyes that I can see the well that you have for me. Open my eyes that I can see the water you have for me. Open my eyes that I can see the reserve you have for me. Open my eyes that I can see the carryover you have. Open my eyes that I can see the provision that you have for me. Because he's not making a way. He's already made it. He's already made the way. Tell somebody, say he's already made the way. Now tell him like you believe that thing. Say he's already made the way. God has already made the way, but you can't see it unless he opens your eyes. Now, if I had a PowerPoint this morning, that would have been on the screen. God has already made a way, but you can't see it unless he opens your eyes. She's right there, ready to give up, just like I was. She's right there, ready to give out. The song said, I almost let go. I was right at the edge of a breakthrough, but couldn't see it. The devil really had me, but Jesus came and found me. He wouldn't let me go. He held me close so I wouldn't let go. Anybody got that testimony this morning? I was so close to giving up. I was so close to throwing in the towel. I was so close to walking away. But God kept me when I wanted to let go. And the problem was that I was at the edge of a breakthrough, but I couldn't see it. God, open my eyes that I can see what's right in front of me. Open my eyes that I can see the way you've made. Open my eyes that I can see the provision you've given me. Open my eyes that I can see I have a future, that I have a hope, that it's not the end of the line, that it's not the end of the rope, that there's still more to come. There's still more life. There's still more joy. There's still more experiences for me. It's not the end, oh God. Despair. Despair will keep you from seeing the way that God has made for you. Despair will keep you from seeing what's already been done for you. Distress will keep you from seeing what God has. It's not that he hasn't made the way. It's just that I can't see it because I'm blinded by something else. You ever watch or ever see that videos? They call it selection attention test. That's when you have something that's happening in a video or something that you're watching, and you're told to focus on one thing. So there's one particular one that was really popular. I couldn't show it this morning, but most of you probably already seen it. It's one where there's like maybe 10 people inside the video, and this half are in black shirts, other half are in white T-shirts, and you're told to watch how many times those in the white shirt pass the ball to the other one. They're just all moving around. But the white shirts are passing and the black shirts are passing. And they say, count how many times they pass the ball. And when the video is over, the question is raised, well, how many times did they pass the ball? And then a lot of times people get it right or get pretty close to it. It was 18 times the ones in the white shirt passed the ball. They said, well, if you got to 18, whatever number is, good, you got it right. But did you see, and then they rewind it, they said, but did you see the big black gorilla walk through the scene? And the first time you see it, like, there was no big black gorilla, and I was watching the whole time. Then they literally rewind the tape so you can see going backwards, and there's a big black gorilla that walks from one side of the screen, just like this. But no one sees it the first time because you're so distracted by everything else that's going on around you that you miss what's obvious. And that's what happens in our lives in the wilderness. We become so distracted by our despair and so distracted by our emotions and so distracted by opinions of people and so distracted by our needs that we miss God's provision, which is actually pretty obvious in our eyes if we'd ever open our eyes and see what he's already doing. Not on top of that, not only is it despair and distress that will keep you, the second thing that will keep you from seeing what God is doing in your life and the provision he's already made for you is your thinking. Look at your neighbor and say, stinking thinking is worse than stinking breath. Because I can cure that with Listerine like that. But stinking thinking can keep you in the wilderness for 40 years. Did you hear what I just said? I said, stinking thinking can keep you in the wilderness for 40 years. Israel went through a wilderness for 40 years because of how they thought. So where do you see that in the text? Well, it's real simple. We missed it. It was a big gorilla sitting right there in the scripture. They have no more water left. She finds a shrub to put her son under, presumably for the shade. He's presumably slowly wasting away from heat exhaustion, maybe a heat stroke, and dehydration. She lays him under a shrub. Question. If you know that there is a shrub there, what else do you know is also there? Water. Why couldn't she see it? Now, first of all, the reason why, because I don't know about y'all, when I think of deserts, I think to myself, man, I'm in a desert. There's no water. There's no water here. There's no water. And in spite of the fact that she engages with the shrub, she puts her son under the shrub. Because of her thinking, she's not thinking. She can't even see clearly enough to know if there's a shrub there, there's also water there. And that's what happens in our lives. We get so bound up in one way of thinking, we cannot see the way that God has made because we circumvent and say, he can't do it. I don't have enough. It's past the deadline. No one's going to believe in my vision. I don't have support. I'm by myself. The devil is a liar. God is a God on top of the mountain. God is still God in the valley low. God is God in the wilderness. God is God in your present. He'll be God in your future. All you got to do is look to the hills from whence cometh your help, knowing that your help cometh from the Lord, the maker of the heavens and the earth. You got to let God change your thinking. Change your thinking. Because stinking thinking limits God, which then limits you. So the question I have for you is, where are you limiting God in your life? Where are you limiting what he can do in you? Where have you limited what God can do for you? Where have you let a poverty mindset keep you from the riches of Christ? Let me tell you something. When I ran out of water in 1997, I thank God that it was a transformative period. That God shifted my thinking because nothing else around me changes. It was me that changed. And sometimes we're waiting for everything else around us to change. And God shows up and opens our eyes and recognize it ain't so much anything around you changing, it's you that got to change. So when the enemy comes and starts sowing all those doubts and are you going to die of cancer? Satan, you're a liar. You're going to be homeless. You're going to be thrown out your house and evicted. Devil, you're a liar. Oh, you're going to be the first one to lose your position. You next in line. Satan, you're a liar. And if any of those things are allowed to be, God still got me covered. He'll still give me a well in the wilderness. He'll still give me water in the desert. He said, I do a new thing. Can't you see it? It'll spring forth. I'll make a way in the wilderness, rivers in the desert. Woo! But I just wanted you to know this morning, there's some things you can't see until God opens your eyes. And I want you to notice, we're trying to be good, okay. Oh, sucky. I'm with family today. Oh, yeah. I feels good. I want you to notice when the angel shows up. Now, if I was God and showing up for me, I'd have showed up after I was thrown out the house. That would have been my plan. Soon as Abraham and Sarah kicked me out, I'd have showed up right there. God ain't showed up then. I'd have showed up when I entered the wilderness. Nope, God ain't showed up then. I'd have showed up when we're like, the water's running. We're about halfway through this water. I would have showed up then. I would have showed up when we ran out of water. He still ain't show up. He waited until the situation became dire. And I'm going to tell you why. Because see, had God showed up in your life earlier than he did, before you ran out of options, he would have solved your problem, but you would have given your options the credit. So sometimes God has got to wait for you to run out of options. You tried mama, she can't help you. You tried daddy, he can't help you. You tried the church, they couldn't help you. You tried your classmates, they can't help you. You tried your peers at work, they can't. And sometimes God has to wait till you run out of options, that when he does it, he gets the praise, he gets the glory, he gets the honor, and you get your blessing. Now why? Why would he do that? Is it just because, only because he's worthy of the honor and praise? He certainly is, but that's not the only reason. The main reason underneath it is for your benefit, because he created you for relationship, and you don't have relationship without trust. So as long as I keep saying, woo, my job saved me out of this one. Woo, my degree saved me out of that one. Woo, my husband saved me out of that one. Woo, my wife saved me out of that one. Woo, my intellect saved me. Woo, my network. He said, you're going to keep giving that the praise. You're never going to learn how to trust me. Now, for her, why was that important? Because she's got a promise that has not come to pass yet. The promise is simple. That boy right there, he's not Sarah's son. He's Abraham's son, but not Sarah's biologically. He's not the chosen one. He's not Israel. That's going to be many nations. But that one right there is going to be a great nation. The way you get from the wilderness to becoming a great nation is to walk through the rest of the process trusting God. And so when God shows up and gives her water and gives him water, that's a sign letting her know, if I could trust God in the middle of a desert to give me a well, I can trust God with the promise he put on Ishmael's life. I don't have a husband. I don't have Abraham. I don't have a job. I ain't got a car. I ain't got a home. I ain't got Social Security, but I got a promise from God. And when God speaks one word, you can count on it, baby. It's going to come to pass. God will use the wilderness to teach you he is worthy of your trust. You can't see that before you go through wilderness. You don't really know it. You know, we know things here. We don't know them here. Oh, God is worthy. Let's see how you really know that when it feels like he ain't. When you're in pain and stuff that ain't going right. You got to know from here to here. And so he uses the wilderness to teach you that he is worthy of your trust. I don't care what Abraham in your life has let you down. I don't care what Sarah in your life has thrown you out. I'm here to tell you today that God himself is worthy of your trust. When you can't trust your friends, when you can't trust your family, when you can't trust your own self, God is worthy of your trust. We were at that point where there was no more options as a church. when we finally got back on this side of town, or on the east side, and we were at a charter school off of Memorial Drive, and well, first of all, we found some land, and it was the last 7 acres that were available in the South of Shawn area over there in Lythorn. How many of y'all know where South of Shawn is? Okay, all right, interesting. And we saw this property. It had a house from the 1920s and a barn on the property, and it was 7 acres, and every other piece of land was gone. Those are all the subdivisions that you would see on that street. And we were able to go in contract with it, and they said, well, we're going to need y'all to come with 20% down. And so the members of the church, every member, ain't this something? There's about 35 of us at that point. Every member, adult member, gave a week's pay towards the down payment. Y'all thought that was bad. We got a little closer to the close, and I said, y'all about halfway there. Y'all, we did it twice. I was still recovering from the first one. And you remember, you were there. You still recovering, aren't you? Ooh, you feel some of those things you feel. We closed on that property, and then it was, you saw what the struggle was just to buy the land. Then it's like, how you going to get a building on it? We wouldn't qualify for a loan. A friend of ours in ministry, he came, I saw him at a conference, and he began to tell me about some investors that were looking for 5 churches that they could build in the metropolitan Atlanta area. They had already built daycares all around Atlanta and senior centers, et cetera, around Atlanta as well as Florida. So I said, well, you need to give me that number. Got their number. They wanted to interview all the leaders. And here's what's so amazing about it. We went for about an hour and a half interview, somewhere near Forsyth area. And they said, you know what, we have hundreds of people applying for this, but we only have a spot for 5. They said, but let me tell you what we want to say about you guys. We want to fund you all because we see the quality of the leadership that you have here. Now, if you rewind the tape, remember I told you how to shift from delegating and doing to developing and leading. Had not God taken us to that place where we had to turn and change our mindset, we would have never got there. They said, so we're going to fund it. So they funded it. And so we went to DeKalb County, went through all the permitting process, which is a lot. We did all that kind of stuff and worked back with the zoning department, you name it, we did it. And they went and got the, that's mine? What? Well, Lisa's godly. Wouldn't that be something? Yeah. Woo! Shondo. Yeah. Maverick City, praise God. So we were getting ready to go, and they came back and said, ho, we got some bad news. I said, what's that? They said, oh, we can't go any further with your project. I said, you're kidding. They said, no, we can't do it anymore. I said, why not? They said, the site work, all that stuff you got to do before you start building, all the plumbing underneath and dealing with what's already there, what's not there, moving stuff, trees, all that stuff. They said, oh, that came out to be almost as much as your loan. You ain't got to have no money to put up a foundation. I said, you're kidding me. They said, no, I'm not. And they said, so we're gonna pull the plug on your project. I was like, devil, you're a liar. And so we began to pray. The church began to pray, and we went to the property, which at that point just still had a barn and a whole house on it. We took those plastic cups, those little ones we used when we were growing up. Took those plastic cups, we went and we got dirt off the property, stuck it inside them cups, brought some seeds, put it inside of it, and we said, listen, we're going to take one of these home, everybody take one home, and start watering it every day. And every time you pray, water that plant. Not because that was going to do something, that was going to be your reminder that as we prayed and as we asked God to do, He's going to cause life to come out of a dead situation. And that's all we did. You remember that. That's all we had. Everybody had their little plant houses right up in our kitchen in the window, and we just going back and forth. And one day, I was over at Newburgh. This is when they built over here, their newest facility, the big one over here. And I was walking through it, and I ran into a guy who He was a younger gentleman who was working under a main guy, and he was doing part of the development with it. And I began to tell him about what would happen to our project, and I said, yeah, we're not going to be able to do it, it looks like, or they telling us we can't do it. He said, what you talking about? He said, Pastor Brawley, he said, let me come over there today. I'll meet you over there right now. Let me go and see, and let me see if I can give you a quote that might be able to better serve you. He came around there, and he quoted the site work, and it was half of what the original quotes came in at. He said, I could do this. And so I called the people, and they really didn't want to talk to me no more because they was done. And I said, well, let us at least have a meeting. We set up a meeting. When I tell you that the main person, which is a Caucasian guy who built New Birth, I just want you to just think about that, right? Who built New Birth in several churches around the world like that one. He went with us to Forsyth County with Elder Finley, myself, and we met with the people, the lenders. And they started going in. Because he's like, we ain't going to do this project because so-and-so and so-and-so. Another one. The Bible says not to. He says you don't start a project without knowing if you have the sufficiency to finish it. So because he know the word too. And they're both Christians. Oh, but so, me and Elder Finn like that. Ooh, that was rough. Oh, you're going to let them talk to you like that? They went, oh, my God. I said, don't say nothing. We just let them go back and forth. They were saying stuff that I didn't know about. It was above my pay grade. By the time we walked out, he said, all right, we're going to let y'all do the project. If he can, this is Joseph Washington. If the black guy, he said, if he can pull it off for that, we'll let you do the project. When I tell you that he pulled it off for less than actually he originally quoted, that all the site work was done, and that they funded our project. And get this, at that point, they're like, you're going to have a building, but you're not going to have a steeple. In some buildings, you need a steeple the way it's made. You ain't going to have a steeple. I said, well, what about the sign? Oh, no, y'all ain't got budget for your sign. No sign. Okay, I said, well, can we get some chairs, you know? He's like, oh, no, y'all worrying about chairs. You ain't got no money for carpet. Well, what's he giving us? So, but when I tell you that God made a way out of no way, when it was all said and done, get this, New Birth donated our whole sanctuary full of nothing but beautiful, wonderful chairs. And when it was all said and done, they said, you ain't gonna have a sound system. We had a full sound system. They said, you won't have a sign. The sign was up before the building was up. Y'all ain't gonna say nothing. God made a way out of no way in the wilderness. If you trust him, he'll show you. He's trustworthy. He won't fail you. He won't let you down. He won't let you fall. All you gotta do is stand therefore and trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding. Acknowledge him, and he knows how to direct you. Y'all come on up. I'm about done. Final point. To know Hagar's story, to know that God met her in the wilderness the first time. And in the wilderness, he provided water for her. She wasn't out of water. He just provided water for her. He gave her water in the wilderness, only to come back around. When she's pregnant, he gave her water. Now to come back around with a son that's dying, he gave her water again. And that lets us know sometimes you got to go through a wilderness to know that if God made a way the first time, he can do it again. 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 It takes a wilderness to see that God can make a way again. And after that time, he can make a way again. And after that time, he can make a way again. It doesn't matter where you are. God is not out of healing power. He can make a way. God is not out of funding power. He can make a way. God is not out of resurrecting power. He can make a way. God is not out of healing power. He can make a way. God is not out of saving power. He can make a way. God is not out of redeeming power. He can make a way. God is not out of giving power to the weak. He can make a way. He can give you new joy. He can give you a fresh start. He can give you hope. He can lift your depression. He can break your cycles. He can fill your spirit. God is not done making a way. Away in the wilderness. You can stand on your feet this morning. That's the God.